Well, hello everyone. It's time for sprinkles. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Anna Olson, and you are you, and this is the Emporium of Sprinkles. Craig and Kathy, that's for you. You know, before I get started with my recipe, I say my hellos. So yes to Craig and Kathy, hello Bonnie. Annabelle, I met you this weekend, and hopefully you are able to join us for this bake-along. Mary Beth, I see you there. Raph, sometimes T joins. We've got lots of people. If you see me looking away, I've got my chat thread here so I can see the questions and comments you're leaving me. Juna, I saw your name pop up, watching from the Philippines. Now, today's recipe is beautifully simple, and I know you're going to enjoy it, because you can't go wrong with a good sugar cookie. And by that, I don't mean the kind you roll out and cut out, but a good sugar cookie that is crispy on the outside, but sweet and chewy on the inside, and made better by lots of sprinkles. So if you are indeed baking along with me, I'm going to do this in real time so that you can do it in real time. The recipe is below on the screen. It is also taken from my new cookbook called Baking Wisdom. It's on page 378. That's a lot of pages. If a cookie makes it to page 378, that means there's a whole bunch of recipes ahead of that. The book weighs a ton, so you can work out while you're doing your baking at the same time. And so, first thing, if you are baking along with me, you want to preheat your oven to 350. You can bake these cookies with or without the convection fan. If you have the kind of oven where you have to adjust the temperature yourself, if the oven doesn't already do it, you want to lower that temperature by 25 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're doing this in metric, it's 180 degrees Celsius, in that range. And hello from Australia and Philippines. Good morning to you, because it's late afternoon, early evening here in Canada. We had a glorious weekend, and now we're back to sort of wintry weather here in southern Ontario. Nice to see your notes. And so, bake along. Your oven is preheating. You want to have 2 baking trays lined with parchment paper. And also have as many as you can, your ingredients ready. You don't necessarily have to have them pre-measured. I pre-measure so that Michael, running all these wonderful cameras, can shoot around things, and I can spend more time talking to you. You can be measuring or weighing as you wish. Now, the first thing you want to do before we start actually making the cookie dough is melt your white chocolate. You have a couple of options to melt your white chocolate. The safest, I'm going to give you 2 now. One is in the recipe itself, and that's to put your white chocolate in a metal bowl. Place that bowl over a pot of barely simmering water. Just let it sit. White chocolate melts at a lower temperature than dark chocolate, so it won't take long. And you're probably saying to yourself, this isn't a chocolate cookie, is it? It's a sugar cookie. White chocolate is my secret to a sugar cookie that is super soft and chewy in the center, and that stays like that for more than a day or 2. I'm actually, because I don't want to be turned away from you melting chocolate for too long, I'm actually going to put my chocolate I'm going to leave it in the dish, and I'm actually going to put it in the oven. Yes, you can melt chocolate in your oven. And essentially what is happening is the moving air in the oven is going to heat the ramekin, and it's the ramekin that's going to gently melt the chocolate. So I don't want to melt it fully in the oven. I just want to get that ramekin heated so that when I stir the chocolate around, it melts. You can work with the chocolate still warm. So if you're at that point and you're joining me to make this recipe, you're getting snow in Winnipeg too. I know. Oh, we feel like by this time already we should be deep into spring. For those of you who live in equatorial climates, well, in Australia, you're heading into fall now. We have just had one heck of a winter here in Canada this year. That is a good suggestion, Floor, about the subtitles and the languages. There will be, when you go back to this video later, there is an option where you can put in closed captioning I believe, and Rob, our moderator, can probably verify that, but there is the option that you can control the language, so you can come back and watch in a different language. Oh, thank you for Carlene. I'm glad you like my blouse. So everyone, if you've got your chocolate melting, oh, I talked about there's the stove top. So you stir it until it's melted. You want to take it off the heat, let it cool a little bit, set it aside, and then you'll start on your batter. I've got mine in the oven. If you wanted to, yes, you could microwave your white chocolate, but you have to now stand by the microwave and set it for every 10-second increments on a medium heat, not high heat. And even when the chips don't seem melted, you have to give them a stir. And you put it back in 10 seconds, pull it out, stir, and then you'll be back joining me. And starting on the first step of the recipe, you've got your 115 grams of unsalted butter. This is a classic drop cookie, and that means you make the cookie dough by hand, and then you scoop and drop the cookie dough onto a tray. So you don't have to roll it, you don't have to shape it, you don't have to chill it, you just make it and bake it, which is perfect for a Tuesday like today when you just need something to cheer you up a little bit. Oh, David, well, thank you for joining us. Oh my gosh, my very first TV show, David just mentioned sugar. That was the very first show I did on television. That was quite some time ago. My hair has changed a little, still straight, but there it is. Great idea. This is a perfect addition, Roshana, to add to your Eid baking. Approaching the end of it. It's, I think, just a week left, if I have that correct. All right, and Rosario's asking about sprinkle brands. Oh, that's a tough one to call. And Mildred, if you're getting ready and you're baking along, now, of course, your scoop size can depend on the size of cookie you make. This one is, now, can I read it? It is size 40. This is a 3/4 of an ounce. So that's about, let's see, 30 mils is an ounce. So 20 mil. There it is. No, in that area. 22. Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Oh, math on the fly. It's good when I've got pen and paper. I'm good. Hello, everyone. I see from Mexico and Montreal. And so all I'm doing now, if you're baking along with me, is I'm softening up that butter a little bit, just so when I introduce the sugars to it, I've got the combination of granulated and icing sugar. And I find it creates a nice texture to the cookie. When you have icing sugar in a cookie dough recipe, it adds a little bit of a finer texture. So that's part of, it's all part of ensuring that chewy, soft center to your sugar cookie at the same time while you have a crispy outside to it. So I've just worked in the granulated sugar, and now I'm going to add the icing sugar. I find you don't necessarily have to sift the icing sugar because you're spending so much time, it's added at the beginning, that you can just carefully, of course, so it doesn't go everywhere, cream the icing sugar into the butter, and that breaks up any lumps. Regardless, if I'm using cocoa powder, I always sift, no matter what I'm doing. So, Kripa is asking, can you use a hand mixer? You certainly can. If you don't want to mix this by hand, you don't feel you have to. It is no more difficult, or well, it's actually a little easier using your hand mixer. Just start on low speed before you increase your speed. Now I'm going to take a peek at my chocolate in the oven. And we can take a look at this if you want to zoom overhead, Michael. So you can see the chips are getting a little shiny. And there we go. They didn't look like they were melted, but just hitting the heat of the ramekin, which do be careful because it's very hot, is now going to fully melt the white chocolate. There we go. And then the white chocolate absorbs the heat, so it cools down the ramekin so it doesn't keep melting it or make it too very hot. I'm just going to make sure it's all smooth. There we go. And I'll just set that aside on my baking tray. And that can cool a little bit while we finish mixing here, but you can work with it warm. So being a sugar cookie, I do have a decent amount of sugar in the recipe. And when you've got more sugar than you have butter in your base, when comes time to add the egg, you may find that your cookie dough base splits a little bit, and that's okay. That's factored into the recipe. There's probably a note that appears below that once you add the white chocolate, it smooths out the base batter. So then I just don't want you to be worried that if you see this funny looking batter once you add the egg, that you've done something wrong. You absolutely haven't. All right, well, Juna, there you are. And hi, Raf. I saw Raf over the weekend at Spring Ridge Farm in Milton. And there we go. Oh, yes, Zenaida. This is a great recipe to make for a kid's party. If you're baking along, I've added the egg. And even though I was stirring and talking a fair bit as I was creaming the butter and sugar together, that step of creaming the butter and sugar is actually a very important one. And I've seen actually quite a bit on social media these days about, well, I think generally it's a habit to undermix the butter and sugar when you start a cookie recipe. This is how you add volume and structure to your cookies, especially one as simple as a shortbread, because a shortbread cookie has no baking powder, it has no egg or anything else, so it really relies on that butter-sugar combination to give the shortbread its structure, to hold it together. So when in doubt, it's really hard to overmix or overcream your butter and sugar together. You would have to do it for 10 minutes, go away, come back and do it for another 4 or 5 minutes before it was actually overmixed. So when in doubt, just give it another minute to stir it. Oh, good, Mildred. I'm glad you've ordered the book. And you will see the note below the screen that you can have your copy of Baking Wisdom signed and shipped anywhere in the world through Premier Collectibles. If you're buying through Canada or the US, you can also go, in Canada we have Indigo Chapters, or there is Amazon in Canada and the States, of course, too. And I think some of the other Amazons, UK, might carry it as well. So my egg is now mixed in. It did take kind of an extra minute because of that quantity and the density of the sugar. And now I'll add my vanilla. Because unlike a chocolate chip cookie that has that caramel note from the brown sugar and the intensity of the chocolate chips, you don't need to add a lot of vanilla. But with a sugar cookie, you want that little bit extra. So I've got 2 teaspoons that I'm measuring with my eye and adding that, because you really want to rely on the vanilla flavor to carry through. And there, that's what I mean. See that sort of sloppiness to the batter? If you're having that happen, you're doing things correctly. Now, my chocolate has had enough time that the ramekin has cooled a little bit, and you can add that melted white chocolate now to the batter. Is there anyone baking along with me? I'd love to hear from you if you are. And if you are, tell me where you are in the process. Guy is asking about what brand of vanilla. Well, there are lots of brands to choose from. I do love Nielsen Massey vanilla myself. This is not a sponsored spot at all. I've just been using it as long as I've been baking professionally. But there are plenty of other good brands out there. A small group of us traveled to Mexico City in March and really tasted some good quality vanilla, and I did bring a fair bit back with me. And so now, here we go. After you've added your white chocolate and the vanilla stirred in, see how this has smoothed out? I think we're ready for an overhead shot here, Michael. So you can really see how it went from a curdled looking mass to now something very soft and smooth. And we're moving right along. Okay, Katie, it's okay. You're at the sugar. You just keep measuring. See, I pre-measured everything. And I'm going to have time to chat while my cookies are in the oven, so you can catch up then. So as a recap, for those who may have just joined, I'm making just a classic sugar cookie, super chewy in the center. We're gonna roll them in sprinkles, and we've already creamed our butter, granulated sugar, icing sugar. I've added 1 egg and the vanilla, and now it's time to sift the dry ingredients. Just regular all-purpose flour. And then you know my secret to chocolate chip cookies and their chewy center is adding cornstarch. So I do the same here, even though I've also got the white chocolate. I add 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. And the reason for that is twofold. Cornstarch is a starch. It's not a protein, and it interrupts the protein strands of the all-purpose flour when you combine everything together. And also, fancy word, cornstarch is hygroscopic. That means it pulls moisture to itself. So having that in your cookie keeps the moisture in the center of the cookie. I'll add the baking soda, a little bit of salt, and give that a sift. And Katie, just get to it when you can. You're probably still working through the butter and the sugar. Add the egg when you can. Don't forget about your white chocolate if you've got it melting somewhere. Oh, good question, Carlene. Can you use a white chocolate bar instead of couverture chocolate? Honestly, no. I wish you could. Because a white chocolate bar, if it's labeled a chocolate bar, then actually, I should clarify. If it's labeled a chocolate bar, then yes. But if it is labeled a candy bar, that means it doesn't actually have enough chocolate cocoa ingredients to be called chocolate, in which case you will likely not have success with it. So if it says, if it's a brand of chocolate, white chocolate, and it says it's a chocolate bar, then you're good to use it. Because some white chocolate is sold in bar form. So now I am stirring that flour with the cornstarch and the baking soda together, and hopefully you're along the same way, around the same step. There's not too much else to do. Now it's the fun part of the scooping and rolling in sprinkles. So everyone will have a chance to catch up. Oh, Jermaine, thank you for your kind words. Roshana saying they were gifted vanilla powder. And how much to use in a recipe? The calls for, well, 5 ml of vanilla essence is about a teaspoon by volume. So if the packet has any labeling, or look up the brand online, it should have a specific guiding because different brands might be a little different. But I would say my gut says to use half the amount. So try it. Oh, Michael's looking it up. It's a 1-to-1. Oh, well, there you go. Thank you for looking that up, Michael. So 1-to-1. So if it calls for 5 ml or a teaspoon of vanilla extract, then you can use the powder. Well, that's very smart. That's good to know. I've just learned something too. Thank you for asking that question, Roshana. Oh boy. And Lisa, can you skip the white chocolate? You're not a fan. Yes, you can. But I will ask you to replace that white chocolate with the same weight of butter. Just because the white chocolate is primarily cocoa butter at its heart, so that you have a cookie that's nice and soft and moist. Just start out with a couple tablespoons, 4 tablespoons extra of butter and you'll be good. All right, so now our cookie dough has come together and it is time to scoop and sprinkle. Now I've already given my sprinkles a test run in the oven. Not all sprinkles are created equal. Some can bleed out their color in not an appealing way, and then you end up with a Halloween looking cookie when you didn't intend it. So I always recommend, if you're using a new batch of sprinkles and you want to make a cookie like this, give it a little test. Scoop the cookie, roll it, dip it, bake one off, and then you'll know that your sprinkles work, or perhaps they don't, in which case you can just roll your sugar cookies in granulated sugar and then bake them, and they'll be absolutely delicious. But the sprinkles are fun. So I'm using my scoop. You could use 2 spoons. And now I'll drop the cookie dough. And it's up to you if you want to fully cover your cookie or just do it on top. Just one layer. That way you don't have sprinkles everywhere. They can, depending on your sprinkles, they can be a bit crunchy. I'm just going to go for a half layer. And while I'm scooping, I can take some questions. Rosario's asking, can I roll in mini chocolate chips? You can't roll the cookies in the chocolate chips. I fear that the chips would melt on the surface, but if you wanted to, you could stir the mini chocolate chips into the cookie dough. That way the cookie dough protects them, and then you'll have those nice little bites. I hope that's good enough. That's a very good question to ask. You could roll in coconut. I think that would be a delicious option. I mean, this is the nice thing about this cookie. It's a simple sugar cookie. It's a simple drop cookie. It can take the addition of flavors. You want to throw in a little lemon zest. Really make it your own. And this is what I want you to do with all of my recipes that you may try, is personalize them. Know where you've got a little wiggle room. So these questions are fantastic. Marianne's asking, can you skip the sprinkles and use royal icing? You sure could. These aren't the kind of cookies that you can roll and make a cutout shape from. So just keep that in mind. These will sort of flatten out and bake up round in the oven. I'm going to get this tray rolling so that way I can set the timer. And these only take, whoop, that one was going to shift around. These only take about 12 minutes. So I'll set the timer and away we go while I keep scooping because I have a second tray ready. How's everyone doing? If you're baking long, Katie, are you catching up? Have you got the flour and dry ingredients sifting in? You'll be scooping cookies before you know it. Before you know it. And also keep in mind, you know how it is if there's a recipe you make over and over again. The first time you make it, it takes this much time. The second time you make it, it takes this much time. And then when it's a recipe you really like, after a while you don't even have to look at the recipe and you just can motor through it in no time. I try and find when I assign a cook time or prep time to a recipe, the prep time is based on sort of not including you getting your ingredients out of the cabinet, because I don't know where you keep your cocoa powder and flour and such things, but assuming you have everything sort of in front of you and ready to go. Oh, thank you. My sprinkles were not in the shot, so the whole point of today's class is sprinkles. So there we go. And Marianne's saying, yes, the cookie dough freezes amazingly well. And you have the choice. You can freeze the baked cookies. You may have an issue depending on the sprinkle. The color may soften up and the sprinkles lose their sort of texture. But this dough, you can pre-scoop just like this, pre-portion them. And if you put them on a plate, chill them for about an hour or so, that firms up the butter. And then you can just pack them in a resealable container, and then you can just pull them out as you need them. Let them soften up to room temperature on the counter before you bake them, and before you roll them in the sprinkles, because frozen, the sprinkles won't stick and you'll be good to go. That's a very good question. Granny is asking, how can I get a signed copy of the new book? You do have options. It depends where you live, Granny. Outside of Canada, your best option is actually the link below to Premier Collectibles, because I have signed book plates for a number of books, and you can order that signed copy and have it shipped anywhere. Otherwise, if you keep an eye to my social media, I do have book signings now and again. I won't be around for the next couple of weeks, but I'm back in June and we'll be signing and signing and signing all summer long. Whoa, Juna, I wish you could come here and bake with me. I think we'd have a blast. I've just got the tiniest little bit of dough left. I'm gonna get like a micro cookie out of this one, but we won't let it go to waste. Oh no, it's come along. There we go, and I'll pop this tray in the oven. I've still got 9 minutes on the existing tray, so this is a great time to take some questions and read your notes. Debbie is asking how many days ahead these can be made. Ooh, well, you've got 2 options. Baked, these will keep for about 2 to 3 days. But if you wanted to make the dough, you could make the dough, scoop the cookies, keep them in the fridge for 2 to 3 days unbaked. Just make sure they're well wrapped. Bake them before you want to take them. Or, as I had suggested earlier, chill the dough to firm them up, and then you could pack them and freeze them unbaked and then bake them right before you need them. I hope that answers your question. You could even bring them. I don't know where your retreat is and if you'll have an oven nearby, but you know the smell of freshly baked cookies makes everybody happy. You could bring them unbaked and all the work's done, and all you have to do is bake them up in the moment. All right, they're coming along. I can smell the vanilla. It smells amazing, and I've got sprinkles everywhere. This would be definitely a great activity to do with kids, and it doesn't matter, you know, a little bit of mismeasurement. If a little egg doesn't make it into the bowl or the flour gets mismeasured, you know you're going to have a delicious cookie at the end. I'm just going to take a minute and look at your questions. Okay, we've got a non-cookie related question. Oh, now it's setting an oven temp for 350 or 180. How would you set the top bottom temperatures in a deck to bake? So that means you have 2 temperature controls. Do I have that correctly? You have a heating element on the top and the below. When it comes to baking, you want whatever is the gentlest heat possible, and typically when you bake anything in the oven, you want the heat coming from the bottom or the back of the oven. So if it's a matter of controlling, minimize the heat on the top, because that can promote too much browning on your baked goods. I hope that answers your question. Oh, hi Suzanne, how are you doing? Another neighbor from just one town over. Suzanne, I did put my cookie trays on 2 separate racks. I put the first one went in the top. With this oven, my fan is at the back, so it really moves the heat, and the heat source is at the back, so it moves the air around both trays. If you have problems with airflows, you can always rotate the trays halfway through cooking. And if you have an oven where the heat seems to be more at the back than the front, then you rotate the trays halfway through cooking. It brings up a very important point. So thank you for asking that, Suzanne. You have to get to know your oven when you bake and befriend your oven. And so we're all unique and different. And so what you want to do is keep an eye on the internal temperature. If you're not sure if your oven is accurate, you put a thermometer on the inside of the oven, because just because it beeps when it says it hits 350 or 180 Celsius, it may not actually be there. And I actually had an oven repair person in and tell me that you should always let your oven preheat an extra 10 to 15 minutes from that point when it actually beeps and says it's the temperature. You have to let the walls of your oven warm up, and you may find then you don't have to rotate your pans as often because your oven is more evenly warm. These questions, great question. Have I tried making chiffon cake in a regular pan? Was the crumb less airy or different? The type of the recipe really, really counts. That's an excellent question. When you make a chiffon cake, it's typically in a tube pan so that the heat can get through the center of the cake. The nature of a chiffon cake is that it's a high volume of cake. It's such a large cake batter that if you were to take that same recipe and split it into 2 normal size, you know, we're talking about 5 to 6 centimeter tall pans, that it should be absolutely fine without having that center core out. You still want to go through the process though of cooling the cake upside down. So you want to have it on a cooling rack so the air can get underneath it, and that allows the whipped eggs as they're cooling to still stretch, and as they set, hold that fluffiness. So that is critical to that recipe, even if you're changing the pans. I hope that's some advice for you. Oh, my banana caramel bread pudding. Oh my goodness. You know what? I haven't made that one in ages. Have I, Michael? I can't remember the last time I made that. It's always wonderful to hear of the recipes of mine you repeatedly make, because I'm always, of course, moving on and creating new recipes. And it's always a nice reminder to sometimes go back and revisit those favorites. Annabelle, hello. Thank you for joining us. I presume this is Annabelle, who I met on Saturday. You can freeze the cookies for up to 3 months. That's usually my general rule for most things that are baked, simply because after 3 months, unbaked or baked, just the freezer gets to the baked goods. Baked goods tend to be porous, and either the flavor changes or the texture changes once thawed. So 3 months is kind of my ceiling for most things. Mani, I wish you could come over and bake too. And in the UK, you should be able to order a copy of Baking Wisdom from Amazon UK, or from Premier Collectibles is also an option too if you want to get a signed copy. Well, Natasha, thank you for your 9. Oh, good. You've got an online business. And you know what? I love that people take my recipes and make them their own. And especially when you can turn it into a business, I think that's fantastic. And I mean that seriously, Mary Beth. I hope, and Kathy, I know you're doing the same thing. You run with the recipes you love and make other people happy. That's the satisfaction from the baking business, right? Oh, cheese danishes. Yes. Oh, good. I'm glad those were a hit too.
Yes, to UK Amazon.
Okay, and we've got the thumbs up. Michael just looked up. Amazon UK does offer the book, so that's the best option for your shipping there. Thank you, Michael. All right. Oh, I love that people are congratulating each other and supporting their businesses. You know, there's something about baking. At this book signing I was at the weekend, there were so many people who were sharing how they were starting home baking businesses. And it's so nice that baking offers that. It's hard to do with savory cooking, but you can definitely do it more with baking. And then you're controlling it and growing at a pace that makes you happy and comfortable. Cheers to everyone. Everyone's notes are so nice. And I am 1 minute and 20 from the cookies here. Ooh, they're looking good. Oh, they're smelling good. The minute I opened the oven, I could smell that vanilla. It's such a simple, homey smell, but that vanilla butter combination just can't be beat. This is a perfect recipe for a Tuesday night if you happen to be joining me and you're on this side of the world, or it's a Wednesday morning if you're joining me from Australia, the Philippines, Singapore, and elsewhere. Snow Sam says the two of us should have our own show, Michael. He'd be on board. Oh, now my or me is asking, why don't your butter cookies hold their shape? I would have to kind of see a photo or see the recipe to know what might be happening there. I did point out at the beginning of this recipe, a critical step when you're making a cookie dough recipe that starts by creaming butter and sugar together is really doing it well. And that's smearing the butter and the sugar around the side of the bowl. The friction of the sugar aerates the butter and that builds in structure. So if you have cookies that kind of lift and then really collapse a lot when they bake, that could be an issue. Oh, Linda's saying your creamsicle, you made the orange creamsicle, but the cake came out dense instead of fluffy. I'm trying to think what could have gone wrong there. Not that it was wrong. It's not a fluffy, airy cake. It is more of a dense cake by its nature. It's not as dense as a pound cake. What I would suggest if you try again is you can actually, one time I ran out of buttermilk for that cake recipe. This is the creamsicle cake from this book. And I just used straight milk. And I figured because I'm adding the orange juice, is that sufficient acidity to activate the leavening? And it was. So I would give that a try. Just switch out from the buttermilk to regular milk and see if that makes a difference. Because if your oranges are more sour, it can almost overactivate the leavening and actually result in sort of a lift and then a collapse. That's my thinking. Yeah, because I really did. I had lovely cakes made with milk instead of buttermilk. Okay, let's take a look at these cookies. Ooh, I think they're looking good. Now see how poofy they are right now, coming out of the oven. So you may have seen me do this with chocolate chip cookies. You have to smack the tray. So are we ready to line up the shot, Michael? I don't know which angle you're going for. Right now? Here we go. And then that collapses the cookie. They flatten out, and then that ensures you get that dense center to your sugar cookies. Ooh, yeah, those are hot. Now, if you want, you can let them cool on the tray. I'm going to set the timer for my other batch of cookies. Here we go. I think they need about just another 3 minutes. But so that I can break into one and show you, I'm going to lift them out onto the rack to cool. They are fragile when they're warm, but not impossible to work with. But this way I can crack into one. Now, Katie, you were baking along with me. Where are you with your cookie process? Are you still scooping? Do you have some cookies in the oven? Let's see if I can catch a note from you. Or maybe your hands are full and you can't type. But no, I'm thinking about you there. NQ, well, that's a lovely question. I don't eat cookies for dinner every day. It's true. But I do try and follow a well-balanced diet. But that does include a treat now and again. But also, you might have heard, if you've watched my live streams before, I tend to move what I make out of the house. So Bonnie down the street usually gets a little taste of what I make. And I share with friends and family, bring things to my parents. And yeah, it's true, Craig. You gotta smack that tray to make it work. Or if it's Kathy, maybe it's typing that note. We've got, a moist, soft banana walnut cake is a request we've got, Michael. So, 222. Oh, yes, you could definitely drizzle some white chocolate. And of course, you can tailor your sprinkle colors if it's a theme party you're making these for or a certain time of year. They can be anything. I've just kind of got every color of the rainbow represented here. Yeah, and it's true, Jacques. Sometimes you just need a simple sugar cookie. Oh, this is still very, very hot. And you're looking for just barely some light brown around the bottom. It's okay because of the sugar in the cookie. If it browns a little bit, you don't want it to brown too much. But then, nice and soft and tender. And honestly, the white chocolate is there, but it's there for the moisture and the sweetness. You don't actually pick up on white chocolate flavor within these cookies. Oh boy, that's a good cookie. This is just one of those cookies that turns you into a little kid again. You need a glass of cold milk. You know, it's a toss-up. A chocolate chip cookie is hard to beat, but a sugar cookie has its place too. Oh, Marianne, you want to see the bottom of the cookie? Yes. So they're just very lightly brown. These could even, they're fully set and fully cooked. They could afford to go for another minute or two more, which is nice to know on a cookie like this, so you've got wiggle room. So it's good now, but even if it were to stay in the oven an extra minute or two, you'd still be absolutely fine there. Yep, best part's eating. There's the next batch. No, I must have talked longer when I was cooking. One more minute. Let that go. And your questions and comments are great. Kelby, I'm glad you like this recipe. I really hope you'll make this recipe. And if you are watching this, just a reminder to everyone who's joined me live that if you're you can always go back and watch this recipe and bake along with me. You can hit pause then anytime you want to catch up. And if you're joining me after this has aired, we were doing a sugar cookie with sprinkles bake along. This is such a simple recipe. It really is a crowd pleaser and a perfect, easy weekday treat. Oh, and from Brisbane. Hi, Christine. And Tammy says, dentists might love me. When I had a bakery in here in the Niagara region, I sold it years ago, but when I had it, it was actually right next door to my dentist's office. So, yes, one business supports another. Boy. Oh, hello from Peru. Now the cookies are done. I can just tell. And yes, they've souffled up. And we're going to give it a nice smack. Whoa! Did you see that one leapt up? Whoop! There we go. How's this tray is cooled? Okay, and there we are in just over half an hour. I have baked and talked my way through an entire batch of cookies, including one little baby one there. That's the one that the chef eats and no one else sees. It's been my pleasure to be here. Your comments and questions have been fantastic, as always, because you are the best viewers. You really are, and I know you are fantastic bakers. And my wish with every recipe I share with you is to make you feel confident, happy, and excited about getting in the kitchen to bake and share with those you love. Thank you very much for joining me. I won't be back with a live stream for the next few weeks, but you will see episodes of Baking Wisdom. I've already got the creamsicle cake and the millionaire tart up there, so more recipes will be coming over the coming Tuesdays. So if you won't see me live for a couple of weeks, you will see me, and I'll keep an eye on the thread, and I thank you for your support. You are truly the best. Have a great rest of your week, everyone, and Michael is waving goodbye too. Take care. Time for more cookie. Mm-hmm.